Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Environmental Coffee House. I am Sandy Shellis, and I am solo tonight as Jennifer did the show last night. She needs a break. It was a long show. And I'm here tonight to talk about a few things. I wanted to start out with this article my older brother sent me. His name is Ed, and he's from Eugene. I'm sure he is not listening. Uh, and it talks about Generation Jones. So we're going to look at this definitely. And let me say hi to everybody. Hi, Poppy. And no, she says it's a new bee. No, it's not. That's an old. That logo is like the original logo that Mindy did way back. Way back when I had long hair. Yeah, way back. Well, anyway, Poppy, Christina, and Christopher. Hi, Kim. Thank you for modding. And Dolores. Hi, Dolores. And Morning. Hi, Morning. Trish Kaiser, Jeffrey Pearson. All right, Rich Diana. Mwah, I love you all. I'm going to get ready. All right. Ready? You need some deep breaths for this one. Solo Sunday. So he sent me this article, and it's quite interesting because, I've said before, Jennifer and I look at our demographics, and we know how old everybody is that watches us for the most part. For the most part, we're all in the same age group, right? Okay. So given that, we actually are Generation Jones, a lot of us. And I'm going to go into what Generation Jones is. I'm going to set it up. All right. And we are going to look at Generation Jones. Why? Now pay attention. Why people that born 1955 to 1964 are not baby boomers. Ode to Generation Jones, punks, yuppies, but never hippies. All right, so let's get going on this one. And I'm wondering, should I pick some music? I love to have a musical background, but I really don't know what musical background to pick for this one. So let's talk about it. And remember, we are blamed by the younger generations for the shitstorm that they're living in and that they're going to live in. We do. We get blamed. But we might get blamed, but they're kind of living the creations that I guess these generations before them gave them. So in a documentary on the 1970s punk scene, an interviewee born in 1959 explained how he didn't identify with the typical baby boomer characteristics and that he was like too old to be Gen X. He felt as though he didn't belong and just defined himself as punk. So I've often wondered about this group of people. They are officially classified as baby boomers, right? Yet coming of age during anarchy in the UK must have given them a totally different experience from those of who came of age during Give Peace a Chance, right? Turns out the man in the documentary was a member of Generation Jones. And Generation Jones turns out the 1980 yuppies of the Reaganomics era. That's what Generation Jones is. Okay? So I'm Generation X, and Generation Jones was the cool older sibling I looked up to and relied on for music suggestions. I had way more in common with Generation Jones than I did with my traditional baby boomer parents who listened to both British and British invasion music before growing their hair long. Just think of the US. This is British, but just think of what we went through in the US. So, between Woodstock, right? And Lollapalooza, between Turn On, Tune In, Drop Out, and Just Say No, and between Dylan going electric and Nirvana going unplugged, an invisible generation has been silent. That's Generation Jones. Let's give him an applause. So, overlooked, even more than Gen X. Generation Jones is the coolest generation you have ever heard about. What is Generation Jones? Well, roughly speaking, Generation Jones are born between the mid-50s and the mid-60s. Like the older boomers, they were born during a period of high birth rates and economic boom. Well, how did they get their name? The term Generation Jones was coined by social commentator Jonathan Pontel. The 1970s slang, keeping up with the Joneses, or Jonesin for short, embodied craving or yearning. You know, remember we were jonesing for a cigarette, only I didn't smoke? The yuppie members of Generation Jones craved big jobs, big money, and big shoulder pads, while another cohort of Generation Jones for something harder. Maybe it's just my experience in an Australian city, but wherever I meet someone recovering from heroin addiction, they seem to be a member of Generation Jones. Well, maybe not so much anymore. Only then it was heroin, now it's heroin, fentanyl, and whatever the fuck else is killing them. Because it's killed two of my friends' kids. So Barack Obama, born in 1961, is America's first and only Generation Jones president and proudly identifies as such. I identify with this generation between the baby boomers and Generation X. My mother was a baby boomer and I'm part of Generation Jones. That was Barack Obama. And I probably did a really horrible Barack Obama. Okay. Other members of Generation Jones include early computer pioneers such as Steve Gates, Steve Jobs, and Tim Berners-Lee. So most of the musicians who pioneered the punk and the new wave sounds of the late 70s and 80s are Generation Jones, as are the 1980s MTV pop stars. And from the movies, most of the Brat Pack pinup idols of my generation, Gen X, are members of Generation Jones. So coming from such high birth rate years, it's impossible to list all the Generation Jones celebrities. But just think about anyone famous now, age 58 to 67, and I'm going to add who hasn't fucking dropped dead. Okay, and in a 2018 study, it was found that the average age of CEOs from the top 1,000 American companies was 58. Generation Jones members born around 1960s. So that, I guess, is the greedy crowd. These greedy motherfuckers that are, destroying the planet. Some of them anyway. So, like everyone, Generation Jones can't be stereotyped. But they did collectively experience world events that would have shaped their formative years. Pragmatism brought on by a prosperous childhood and austere adolescence. So from a prosperous 1960s childhood, Generation Jones lived their early years with optimism and high expectations. But their grand plans took a sobering turn, oh God, once their 1970s adolescence hit. This was a period of high unemployment and deindustrialization. Just as they were becoming aware of the world, Generation Jones were met with the likes of Watergate, stagflation, oil embargoes, and the rise of terrorism. So with high expectations left unfulfilled, is it any wonder that Generation Jones became punks and then yuppies once the economy improved in the 80s? This mixed experience of the 60s and 70s at such key developmental stages in Generation Jones' lives meant that they turned out pretty pragmatic. So, between the personality extremes of boomers, idealism, and exercynicism lies the more balanced mainstream Jones quality. Hmm. Generation Jones didn't moan about their lot, except maybe in a few choice punk songs. Most of them worked hard and just waited for things to improve. Hard working. With that tight job market, during the 70s, Generation Jones concentrated on working hard, perhaps yearning or jonesing for the prosperity of their childhood. They dressed for the jobs they wanted, not the ones they had, and developed methods of standing out from the multitudes of other Joneses. In just a few years, Generation Jones managed to transition from an attitude of no future to one of conspicuous consumption. And god damn, can we definitely know that? Because it was. We didn't have a fucking shot. Adaptable. Anyone who can go from being a punk to a yuppie has got to be adaptable. Generation Jones were so adaptable when it came to politics, right? Regardless of the party, they vote for the candidate most likely to bring about change. Generation Jones, they've been known to use their large number to swing elections, such as the election and re-election of Republican President George Bush and the and the you know what, I got to do this for George Bush. Ugh. And the 2006 election of a Democratic majority in both the Senate and House of Representatives. So inventive, perhaps stemming from that DIY attitude of the 1970s punk and new wave scenes, and fed by the consumption and yearnings of their yuppie days. Members of Generation Jones are behind many of the advances in technology we enjoy today, which is the younger ones enjoy today, like my kid who's 33. The quick development of new technology, the latest cell phone, iPod, or computer is Jonesier directed and relies on the idea that these formerly conspicuous consumers still want the latest in technological toys. Oh my God. When I see older boomers struggle to send a text message that isn't all in caps, Generation Jones are quick and confident with technology as a Gen X or millennial. Even more ignored than Gen X. When we think of baby boomers, we tend to think of the older group, with their idyllic post war childhood and their adolescence bathing in peace, love, and understanding. We don't think about the large group of people who came of age during the 70s economic downturn. How many of you remember that? It's a lost or forgotten generation in a sense that a lot of attention is given to the baby boom generation. And then there was a whole Gen X Babble-palooza that started in the 1990s. I would argue that the spotlight passed over a large generation in between. So what's the difference between boomers and Generation Jones? While usually lumped in with those baby boomers, research shows that, research, that members of Generation Jones have altogether different collective personality traits. Sociologists, not Scientologists, but they're in Generation Jones, now regard them as a distinct generation. Perhaps the only thing Generation Jones has in common with older boomers is high birth rates. Generational personality stem from shared formative experiences, not head counts. So unlike the older boomers, Generation Jones were not born immediately after the Second World War. They were not born during those early years of heady post-war optimism and prosperity. They were the ones who came after. Things were still good during Generation Jones's birth years, but they were different. For one thing, Generation Jones never lived without a television, and it was most likely a color television. They were too young to be civil rights protesters or take part in the 1960s counterculture. They can hardly remember the Kennedy assassination, and they didn't go to Woodstock or Vietnam. Well, Woodstock 94 I went to. Okay. By the time Generation Jones came of age, it was no longer possible to make love, not war. The sexual revolution was over and the AIDS epidemic was looming, and who doesn't remember that? It fucking ruined, well, I was married, but it ruined a lot of my friends' sex life. Today, most older boomers are enjoying their retirement and their grandchildren, but many members of Generation Jones are still working, and some have college-age kids to support. Generation Jones and popular culture. Now, I thought this was good. I'm going to try to make it bigger and move me so you could see it. And I really hope you're enjoying this because it's something different, and it's going to lead to the rest of the show, which is kind of, a little collapsy. So if you look at the catchphrases, can you see them? I thought they were really good. Catchphrases, and maybe I won't go through all of them, but a catchphrase of, all right, what was the favorite TV family? Well, for boomers, it was the Cleavers. But for Generation Jones, it was the Brady Bunch. And for Gen X, the Simpsons. This is good, I think our hi, Lindsay Robb, by the way. I think our generation here, and like I said, I know our demographics really can feel this one. How about the defining movie? For boomers, it was The Graduate. But for Generation Jones, Animal House. Generation X, Reality Bites. Okay, let's see. Thoughts about Elvis. The boomers thought he was the king. Generation Jones thought, overweight. And Generation X thought, Costello. I love this. This is good. All right, let's see. Signature haircut. All right, girls and guys. Long hair of boomers, but big and feathered Generation Jones. I wish I had pulled up some of my pictures. And then Generation X, spiked or shaved. And let's go through one more. All right, here we go. Submersive. Oh, wait, no, we have to go through two more. Drug of choice. Acid boomers. And I contest that because there was a lot of acid in my life as a younger person. Generation Jones was pot. And Generation X was ecstasy. All right. Now, the definite subversive activities for boomers, it was a subversive activity was taking it off and burning your bra and your draft cards. But for Generation Jones, it was streaking. And I remember that because people did. They right in our high school. I remember this Bobby, he was from Chile. He was an exchange student, and he streaked right through the football field. And let me tell you, at 6'1" with long blonde hair at 19 or 18, it was nice. We saw it. And for Generation X, it was moshing. So I like that. I thought that was really cute. And Generation X music. Let's see. Can I find... Let me see if I can find anything. Well, I can do a generation. Well, I'll probably get a copyright for this one, but you all know who is this? The boomers. Yeah, I wish I could play the whole thing, but I can't because I can get a copyright on that one. So let me see if I can find a generation. Let's see if I can find one. Do you think this is Generation Boomer? Generation Jones or Gen X? I don't know. Ooh, this could be anything. All right. This is one of my favorites. That's why it's in the sounds. All right. What do you think, guys? So, it was the Generation Jones music scene that saw the advent of punk, new wave, post-punk, disco, electronic music, and rap. Now, Ian Curtis, John Lloyd, Sid Vicious, Jello Biafra, Thurston Moore, Henry Rollins, Morrissey, Grandmaster Flash, and Africa Bambaataa are all members of Generation Jones. And one of my favorite scenes, Melbourne, now maybe she's Australian, little band scene was headed up by Generation Jones musicians. Out there in the chat, why don't you put down who were a couple of Generation Jones musicians? Who do you think? I can tell you. Nirvana? Maybe? Okay. All right. So then in the 1980s, members of Generation Jones, they became some of the most well-known pop stars played on MTV and beyond. Remember when MTV first started? I'm sorry, I had a little black and white TV that barely worked with an antenna, but we got cable. Hi, Kinky Streets. Good to see you. And Patty P. All right, so we had Madonna, Michael Jackson, Janet Jackson, Prince, Def Leppard, Bon Jovi, Guns N' Roses, INXS, Whitney Houston, Duran Duran, U2, George Michael, The Bangles, Paula Abdul, and of course I was still a deadhead and I liked all the biker music. Whether famous on the local gig circuit or the international airwaves, Generation Jones are some of the hardest working musicians around. They slogged away for years without the luxury of being discovered on reality TV. Oh, except for Susan Boyle, born in 1961. So still jonesing. It makes sense that Generation Jones, they're swinging votes. They swing from a prosperous childhood to austere adolescence, from punk to yuppie. This is a group of people who've had to adapt and reinvent their entire lives. And don't I say that I've reinvented myself at least 5 times. And I'm working on it again. So, as she says, I regard Generation Jones as the cool older sibling I always wanted. I devoured the music and films they gave me. Without the indie music of the 70s and 80s, there'd be no 90s indie music. And I, a Gen X, would have no music. Maybe Nirvana was 90s. Yeah. The older baby boomers, my parents, they were cool. But being a full generation apart, they were further removed. More unrelatable than Generation Jones. So like Generation X, I hope Generation Jones gets more recognition they deserve, right? Well, I'm sure they do, because they're your company's CEO. Right? Oh my God, that was pretty good. Yeah, I hope you guys like that. I really do. And do me a favor, do that old like and subscribe thing. I really do hope you like that. But we're going to move on. And hi, BB. And hi, Jerome. Todd Rundgren. Oh, my God. I love Todd Rundgren. Christopher, I'll give you a memory. I got the double album set. My uncle took me to New York City to buy me, took me to, I think it was the big record place in Times Square. Was it Record Theater? Well, whatever. And I picked out I picked out Todd Rundgren, and God, I must have listened to that on my stereo 100 million times. I still love him. I even drove by Bearsville Records, where he had his studio in Woodstock, New York. But that was back when he was married to B.B. Buell, and she had a kid and said it was Todd's, but it was really, what's his name from Aerosmith, Steven Tyler. Yeah, she's now old. She's an actress. All right, so here we are. Hey, she's got to go milk the goat. Hi, sweetheart. Hi, Chris. I hope you're feeling well. Let me cough a little bit. I can't cough in your ear. I'm moving on, though. Okay, so I'm kind of going to depress us now. So now that we learn what Generation Jones is, and we know that our demographic is so much the same, and a lot of it gets explained. And even if the younger people are angry at us, they're using the benefits that we left them. Even though I will say the CEO class sucks and the billionaire class sucks and the politics sucks, and we kind of fucked up that way. Not all of us. So that leaves me to another another. I'm going to look at this. I'm going to pull this up. This is collapse psychology. And because we just learned who we are, we're also learning that we're going to collapse. And so I was inspired by someone named Karen Jordan, and I'm going to talk about her in a little bit because she's going to be our guest. And I got turned on to her by her husband on Twitter and by Michael Dowd. But first, I want to go into a collapse psychology because it's being studied, and it'll probably be studied until we collapse. So this is a website I found, and they study human behavior and responses to ongoing sudden collapse, including social, environmental, and systemic breakdown. It's very interesting to me. It really is. And this website, they've got a lot going on. Yeah, I think you're right. We are the last generation to get out of this mess with the screen door barely hitting our guilty asses on our way out the door. I don't think my daughter understands that. She's moving to Atlanta. But anyway, they have a bunch of areas of study: attachment theory, collapse awareness, compassion. I think if I had been younger, I might even get into this since my degrees are definitely in this area. Creativity, eco psychology, grief counseling, which Carolyn Baker does a lot of that. Ritual literacy, somatics, transformative justice. It looks really interesting. And trauma stewardship. So they have a resource list. I just wanted to introduce you to this collapse psychology page um as I grow into the whole genre. I mean, yeah, we're called doomers. Yeah, we are definitely not buying the bullshit. And as you see, the picture behind me, let's see if it shows up, is of exactly what the fuck is happening. See this picture? That was what was behind me. What it really is. Check it out. This is where we are. This is where we are. As everybody, I don't even have to say anything about the picture, you know, but this is where we are. Let's see if I can find something else. A little bit more music in the back. Yeah. So that's where we are. And you know what? Sometimes because of where we are, that's me. It's one of my daughter's favorites. Sometimes. Absolutely, sometimes. But to move on and not be so, pessimistic. And this has been my life. The awkward moment when a zombie is looking for brains and walks right by you. That was my marriage. Okay. All right. So we went through collapse. We went through collapse psychology. And now hi JF Sebastian. Now we're going to move on a little bit. And I thought for shits and giggles we would look at the overarching frequently asked questions by the IPCC report. So let's get started, okay? I'm going to read them and then I'm going to answer them. And this is going to be brief, really, okay? So What are the new insights on climate impacts, vulnerability, and adaptation from the IPCC? We are so fucked. How will nature and the benefits it provides to people be affected by higher levels of warming? We are so fucked. How will climate change affect the lives of today's children tomorrow if no immediate action is taken? Their lives will be fucked. How are people adapting to the effects of climate change? And what are the known limits to adaptation? I fucking don't know. What strategies could increase climate resilience of people and nature? I wish I fucking knew. And what is climate resilient development and how do we pursue it? Oh, okay. Well, for that one, I'm going back here. All right. Anyway, now that I'm making jokes on really the seriousness of the mess we're in, we really are. And if you want, we move over. Yeah, I did, and I have the same one, buddy. I have the same T-shirt. This is something I'm not going to read, but the Tao, Philosophy and Religion Collapse. It's beautiful. This is from Mark Brimblecombe, who you probably know. And all I'm just going to do is go over this really quickly. The 3 sections of the climate change and mitigation myth. It's a good article. You probably all have read it. So he talks about the anthropogenic human-induced warming from greenhouse gas. Emissions must be understood in the context of the natural carbon cycle, which until about 150 years ago was in equilibrium. The mitigation myth is that we can reduce the effects of the worsening greenhouse gas emissions by net zero by 2050 or earlier. And what do you think? I don't know. I don't know. No, I know. And you all know. The big problem is not climate change. It is global ecological overshoot. And we have said that. And it's climate disruption. But we have said that over and over and over. It is overshoot when our ecological footprint exceeds biocapacity or sustainability. Global warming is a result. Overshoot leads to collapse and eventual extinction, and we are now in irreversible collapse. Us, Generation Jonesers, probably made that happen. So I went to another page, and St. Andrew I'm going to find. I have a video he did, but I'm going to find St. Andrew, and I'm going to invite him to be our guest. He has a whole thing here, and he did a really good video. I'll put the link in the show notes afterwards. He talks about the stages of awareness of psychology of collapse, and it's so good. The deadest sleep, the awareness of one fundamental problem, the awareness of many problems. And actually, you probably can't see this, so I think maybe I'll just come back and get rid of myself. All right, so I'm just going to tell you what it is while you look at me and the chessboard behind me. Awareness of the one fundamental problem, awareness of many problems, awareness of the interconnection between many problems, awareness that the predicament encompasses all aspects of life. Response to collapse. Oh, there's lots of them, right? And we went through them. Slumber, denial, apathy, preoccupation, hedonism, overwhelmment, blind hope, individual change, progress worship, leader worship, apocalypse worship, despair. So is there a way out? The 2 paths, the inner path, self-healing, the outer path, balanced realism, and a conclusion. So I'm not going to read the whole thing, but the stuff will be in the link, the notes. All right. Now I'm going to move on because this is these are Karen and Jordan. And let me get them up. All right, Karen and Jordan, and let me see if I'm going to show you this video. Let me get it set up. And you'll meet Karen and Jordan here.
Everything we've ever known, all the history we've ever known, every single Homo sapien, both in recorded history and evolutionarily, has existed.
Whoops, sorry.
On this pale blue dot.
What we've got is basically a house of cards. Those few areas that are based solely on monoculture agriculture, like, the corn belt, the wheat belt, the climate is shifting.
I'm choosing to use my white privilege, my American white privilege, in a radical way.
You get told that you have to work to get food. Food is this particular thing and it's all locked up. The key hole is a $sign, and that's how you get into the food closet.
Food is running out. We don't feel it here in the States, but in many other areas of the globe.
I had a seat in Parliament for the left-green movement for 10 years, and the last 100 days of that period I was a minister for the environment.
This glacier, as all glaciers in Iceland, are going to last for 150 years. They're going to melt completely. Then when that happens, when that glacier disappears, there's going to be a fjord here. And it's going to be a pretty deep fjord, 300 meters deep fjord.
And actually what we've seen is that the population will level off at about 10.5 billion towards the end of the century, so in about 100 years from now, or 90 years from now.
What happens around 9.5, 10 billion? What happens there?
Food, essentially.
If I said you were putting all of your future ancestors into a death machine and strapping them down, and in 1,000 years they're going to have to pay the deferred maintenance price of the decisions you make today, what would you do? Would you say, like, that's not right?
So actually that is a picture, and it is innocently violent. It's on YouTube. All right, wait a minute. I got to shut it off. It's over on YouTube, and let me show you their, this is his Twitter, and I follow them, and they follow me, and he posts a lot, So interesting if you're on Twitter. You can find them. And she's going to be my guest. Karen, this I'm going to show you. Oops. I got to fix something. This is what, this is Karen. And she was with Michael Dowd. There she is, Karen. And so she will be with us. I'm looking forward to that for sure. So what I'm moving on to next is something Karen wrote, and it is segued down to, it's called Tenants of Grace, and she sent that to me today because she wrote to me, and she was like, she's really enthusiastic about us having like the premier, female chick channel, which we are, and I explained to that we are diverse and we have a lot of voices, and she's going to come on, and Felice Todd is coming back. So we have Jennifer. We have a lot of awesome voices. So I'm going to just read her getting real about collapse and extinction. All right. Here we go. The end of the human race will be that it will eventually die of civilization. I definitely need a song for this one. All right, here we go. The civilization way of living has never been sustainable. The 10,000-year experiment of living differently, separate from the rest of the community of life, has always risen and then fallen. Global industrial civilization is collapsing, just as every civilization model before this one has done. This time, however, the harnessing of fossil fuel energy has made our species Homo colossus giants with the ability to destroy the natural systems required for our survival. The result is, in addition to societal collapse, the biosphere we depend on for life is collapsing as well. This is a predicament, not a problem, thus requiring wise responses, not false solutions. So I'm going to read 10, okay? 10. Number 1. Before the truth will set you free, it will most likely make you angry. Don't shoot the messenger. 2, let go or be dragged. Get through the grief and know that the freedom and benefits exist in the acceptance. Number 3, grab a buddy who won't pull you down. It's harder. It is. It's harder to get real alone. Expect other crabs in the pot to constantly yank on you. And you know what? Let's see if I have that picture. The crabs in the pot. I don't know if I uploaded it. I probably didn't. Oh, well, too bad. Resist the urge to pull others down if you slip back into denial. Abandon hopium. Hope and false solutions are placeholders for inaction. Both are harmful in responses to our predicament and can foster even more denialism. Ooh, even more denialism. 5, we would all benefit from becoming much more comfortable with death and dying. 6, we would all benefit from, 6, nature's primary, period. No more humans first. Making amends to the rest of the community of life while attempting to clean up the mess needs to be a daily way of life. Every day is Earth Day. Number 7, there needs to be urgent conversation about setting the younger generations free and what that can look like. Continuing to pass along the dominant culture denialism, it's super abusive. It's definitely super abusive. I'm putting that one up because it shows the whole thing. Super abusive. If the response feels predictable and familiar, it's not the right response. Our species is really being challenged to elevate. It's not about becoming more clever. Predicaments do not have solutions. We need radical responses equal to this radical situation. Logic says if it's a cancerous growth and a growth is the issue, the first response is to stop the growth. Apply grace. Getting real about collapse and extinction to daily living and let it guide all decision making. If you have privilege left in the game, what will you use it for? Bottom line, we got to get comfortable talking about it. Continuing to bury our heads in the sand is not the path to enlightenment. People say, well, if this is happening, then there's nothing we can do about it, so why think about it? Too depressing. No, number 6 and 7, nature is primary, period, and there needs to be urgent conversations with the younger generations. Absolutely, this is what has to happen. So that was Karen. And I liked it. So Karen is definitely going to be back with us, and I'll show you this. This was her piece. And here's Karen. Okay? So she will be with us, and I really look forward to that, to Karen coming on with us. So I think that this was pretty much a busy show. We're talking about, you read the IPCC report, we know this, that there's so many issues going on. And if you read the one piece, and if I can find it, it was, you know, about the ecosystems. And I don't know if it was this one, the key findings, but it is definitely sobering. And yes, you can criticize the IPCC all you want, but this is a sobering report, and the next one is is going to be, well, how are we going to do it? How did I answer? You know, how are we going to do it? Am I nihilistic? I mean, I know Peter Kalmus would be mad at me. I look at his Twitter, and he is so upset. He is very upset, actually. And he says that the fossil fuel industry has been lying for decades, systematically conspiring to do so with fancy campaigns. Sadly, nothing they say can be trusted at this point. Society needs to seize their assets. This may sound radical now, but it will sound less and less so over time. Well, I don't know. He says we can't realistically expect for a for-profit industry and its investors to voluntarily ramp themselves down into non-existence. So, where do we go? Where do we go? You think we're going to get off fossil fuels? I don't. We're in a war now. Well, we're not in a war in the United States, but we might as well be. The bombings and what's happening, and I'm not going to make a political discussion out of this. It's all wrong. It's all wrong. So that being said, I want to thank you for coming. And I'm going to take a couple of comments here. Daniel says the IPCC could say we are all going to die in the next year if we don't change, and that would still have no effect on this capital system. Get off the grid. You know, I had a couple of Heartland Institute videos pulled up, but honestly, guys, I did not have the heart to play them. They are so bad. They are so bad, and they are such a bunch of fucking liars. They really are. Wow. Hi, Bila. Jerome. All right, we're not going the politics way. I see. Our world is all wrong. I'm not gonna get involved in the conversation out there. I just want to say that I thank you for coming. Hey, Aunt Sandy. I like it. Yup. He'll make an unorthodox cup of coffee. All right, Loie, this is for you, babe. Thank you guys for coming. I love you, Bila. I love you all. Patty. Yep. All right. So as I usually do, I will play some music on the way out. And put your comments up. I don't know if this is Generation Jones, but we're going to do the peace out. Peace out. I love you. See you Wednesday morning. I got a little trip to do tomorrow, a little favor for a good friend. I don't know if this good friend is still in the audience, but I love you. Good night.